And we're live now, Councillor Leggett.
Okay. All right, let's start this meeting of Te Puna Kōrero of Thursday, the 24th of March. I'll now declare the meeting open. Let's move to apologies. Do we have any apologies? Have we got an apology from Taku? Can't see him here.
Haven't received one, Councillor Leggett, so we could...
Lateness.
We'll note it for lateness, yeah. No other apologies. Well, we don't need to. Well, yes, I do. I'll have a seconder for that apology. For lateness. Yes, thank you, Councillor Waddle. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Let's remind in the main body of the meeting with reports, if you want to speak, can you hold up your hand electronically, please? Makes it easier for everyone, I think. So let's move to item number 2, which is public forum. There's been no requests to speak. So that moves us to item 3, which is conflict of interest declarations. Are there any conflicts of interest that people want to declare, councillors would like to declare? There being none, I'm going to move on to notification of extraordinary business, of which there is none. And so we get to item 5, which is confirmation of the minutes of Te Puna Kōrero of the 3rd of March 2022. It seems a while ago now. I'll move it as a true and correct record to get onto the table. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Are there any corrections, comments that councillors wish to make? There being none, I can see. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. So that moves us to the first item on our agenda, which is 6.1, removal of library overdue fines. All right, I'll just get this up on the... Right, I'll take it that I'm going to move it to get it onto the table. Do I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Tron. Thank you very much. I'll take it that everyone has read the report. I'll just get Ruben. Is it you that's going to do it, Ruben, or is it going to be Brian?
Kia ora, Chairman. Yes, I can talk to it, and Brian is here also if people have more questions. Okay, that's good when we get to questions. So if you'll just very briefly introduce us to what you're asking us to do here. Kia ora, Councillor Leggett. Kai kaunihera o te hapuri nei. We have been investigating the usefulness of library fines. Currently, we spend around $20,000 in chasing up fines, but what we have found is that using this means to try to encourage people to return their books has the opposite effect of encouraging people to use the library. And there has been a move across New Zealand and around the world to remove library fines. And the idea is that we actually want more people using the libraries than users not using the library. So with the costs, there is about $20,000 all up. But Brian is here and we think we can get that cost down to $9,000 a year. And then from that 9,000, we can offset that with other internal charges that we can generate revenue from.
Okay, thanks very much, Ruben. Councillors, does anyone want to ask a question of either Ruben or Brian regarding this? Yes, Councillor Trillin and then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so first of all, I'm really supportive of this. I think it's a really good idea. I think the case made for it in the report is a very strong one, and the more people we can encourage to use the library, the better. And it does follow a trend regionally as well. So we definitely very much support this. I just had a question of clarification initially. So on my reading of the report as it currently stands, it's unclear as to what will happen on 1 July of this year with existing library fines, so the fines that are already there. So I was wondering if you could just clarify, does this report and the recommendation as currently worded, will that result in currently existing fines also being wiped on 1 July?
Kia ora, Councillor Trillin. Through the chair, I will pass that question to Brian, who will be able to give some more detail there. Are you there, Brian?
Yes, Ruben. Thank you. We're proposing to waive existing fines in the system. For the last 15 years, we've been clearing fines older than 2 years anyway, so we don't actually have a huge amount sitting there at present. The data would stay on the borrower's record, but the actual charge amount would drop off as of 1 July.
Cool, thanks very much. I'm wondering, Ross, if it would be worth, with the recommendations as they currently stand, maybe just including a note after recommendation 2, just noting that currently existing fines will be waived. And just the reason for that is, I'm really glad that that's the intention of the report. It's not clear on the current wording of the report that would happen. So I'm glad we don't need to amend anything, but I wonder if it is just worth including a note there.
Can we take advice from officers in terms of how that might work? I'm not sure whether it's something we want to signal immediately necessarily, but I mean, I take the intent of what you're saying. It's going to happen anyway. Can I have some advice from officers in terms of that?
Brian, are you able to shed some light there?
Certainly we've got an established process for waiving charges through the council finance system. I'm not sure. Certainly there is going to be an interesting period between now and the 1st of July where people will be, shall we say, more reluctant to pay fines as we're not going to be doing them anymore. I'm not quite sure of the structural thing through council for amending the report, but it's from the operational point of view, waiving is easy.
Yeah.
Councillor Leggett,
Yes.
was yours a process question about how to get a noting recommendation in there, or a more technical question about how this will be achieved? Because for the first, I think an amendment, Councillor Trillin could move an amendment to that effect. And for the second, I think Brian is correct. I think we might as well say goodbye to any fines that fall due between now and 1st of July. I don't know that that's well, I just think of my own behaviour. If faced with that possibility, that I wouldn't have to pay if I just waited a bit longer. So I think that is likely to happen anyway.
I do have some wording that we could use. I'm happy to suggest, Ross.
What can I ask what other councillors think? I mean, I would rather say nothing and do it. I mean, even though it's public now anyway, but, you know, just for the sake of, you know, that behaviour that Wendy's talking about, given that our intent is to do this anyway, Councillor Trillin, but I'm happy to take an amendment if you wish and have a seconder. Mayor Baker, did you want to say something regarding this?
Well, I just think the report's pretty straightforward. We're going to do it straight away, so we just sort of need to process it and get on with it. We'll obviously put out a media statement saying it's happening. So from my point of view, the report's pretty straightforward, but that's just me.
Except it's from 1st of July. It's not straight away, is it?
I thought I'm happy to support it to start from now. I thought it was starting from now, is what I'm saying.
No, it's not. It's effective from 1st of July. That's the recommendation.
I'm happy to support Josh's motion to change it to now.
Okay. Is that what you were suggesting, Councillor Trillin? To just change the date from 1st of July, but we need to take some technical advice as to how easy that might be as well.
Yeah, well, I think because if the current intent, as explained by Brian, is that once we reach 1 July, those fines will be waived anyway. It may be that there's some technical or administrative reasons why we need to push it out to that point, and happy to take advice on that. But that's why I wonder if it's just explicitly worth noting in the minutes that this will result in those current fines being waived, just for the avoidance of doubt, because on my current reading of the report, that's unclear.
Can I just ask, are there any technical reasons why it shouldn't take place as from, say, the 1st of April, aside from the fact of, financial years, etc.?
Kia ora, Councillor Leggett. That is exactly the consideration was new financial year, staying within our budgets and within predicted forecasts. But I don't see there being technical issue to it. It's more about financial, but there will be a time period that is required to make it happen. So I don't think we'll be able to do it immediately, but we could move sooner.
Look, Josh, what were you suggesting, Josh? Can we go back? Has anyone else got anything to say on this particular matter? Yeah, Councillor Weeharper, you've got a different question.
Councillor Duncan's been waiting a while.
I know, but he might have a different question.
Yeah, so I'll just put in the chat, there you go, that my proposed wording, note that this will result in all existing library fines being waived on 1 July 2022.
Okay, I don't see an issue with that, but Councillor Weeharper, do you want to make a comment?
I just wanted to say a bit of overthinking going here. I'm quite happy with the paper as it stands, to be honest.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, look, I just think fines are there as a consequence for poor decision making and selfish disregard for others who may wish to borrow the item. And we're told that anecdotal reports suggest unpaid fines are a disincentive for using the library. Well, how long then before we decide to drop our full item recovery process for the same reason?
Do we have a response to that? Either Ruben or Brian?
Yeah, kia ora, Councillor Leggett. We have no interest in dropping any of the other recovery or replacement costs. That's something that can't be changed because we need the books to give out. So while we want people to use the library, we still need the books in the library. So there will be absolutely no change there ever.
The other proposal we'll be doing is we will be automatically blocking people's right to loan materials once they have something that is what we call long overdue, which is a couple of weeks past the normal overdue point. We can do that very easily through the library system, and we feel that will be more effective. Basically, if you don't bring it back, that's it. You're not borrowing anything again until you do so.
Does that satisfy you, Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay, so Councillor Hayward, do you have a question?
Yeah, my bad there. Kuna matua upoko. I was actually disappointed that if a motion is required, I will second the motion, the wording that has been proposed by Councillor Trillin. However, I don't know if Councillor Trillin is actually alluding to that. What I heard from officers was that if there was an assurance that that this work was done sooner, then that would carry out the sentiments that as I understand it from Councillor Trillin. But if a motion is required, I will second.
Okay, are there any other comments? I mean, what about from any of the rest of the councillors? I mean, I tend to think I support Councillor Weeharper that this is a bit of a overthinking here, and that what you're worried about is not going to happen anyway. And that's my perspective. But Councillor Ford, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think from what I'm hearing from Councillor Trillin is that he just wanted clarification put into the report to make sure that it did happen, because sometimes if you don't state the obvious doesn't happen. So that's what I kind of took away from it. But
right,
the paper itself is pretty straightforward. I wasn't anticipating. Yeah, anyhow.
Yeah, you're actually asking for that to go in under 2 in the recommendation, aren't you, Councillor Trillin? That's your...
Yeah, just as that clarification, I didn't see this as changing the substance of the report.
That's what
I wonder if, just to get through this, I'm just going to, if it's okay with you, Ross, just move it as an amendment that we include this note, and then we can just up or down vote it and move on.
Move it as an amendment then.
Cool.
Excuse me, Councillor Leggett, through you. Councillor Trillin cannot move the amendment as he originally seconded the original.
Yes, he seconded that. So do I have a mover for the...
Yeah, I'll move it.
Councillor Trillin's, moved by Councillor Ford. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded.
Mayor Baker. Thank you. So, Caroline, we now move the motion. Can we have it again? So can you put it up on screen so that we're clear of...
It's just in the chat, Ross.
Yeah, but it came up. Okay. All right. That this will result in all existing library fines being waived in...
Sure, it should be on 1 July.
On 1 July. Okay. Oh, gosh. Yep. Okay. Right. Sorry, I'm just manipulating my screen. So I now put that amendment. All those in favour? Those against? All right, Councillor Weehup, you're going, all right. Carried. Now I put the substantive motion. Substantive recommendation. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Can now move on. Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you to officers. We now move to item 6.2, which is investigation into a request for a graffiti wall in Porirua City. Remember, this was to lie on the table till we got this report. I'm going to move it to get it onto the table. Have a second to thank you, Councillor Morell. Ruben, do you want to talk to this again very briefly, given that we've all read it?
Yep, I can. Thank you, kia ora, Councillor Leggett. It came out of a wellbeing request from a young Porirua resident who wanted a graffiti wall. After much consideration, we've decided that it's not in the best well-being interest of young people to encourage them to commit crimes and to do graffiti. However, we do think it is a great idea to provide them an opportunity to express themselves through street art and to create a space for that to happen. We looked at other programs around Wellington and around the country that worked really well. And one of the best programs is to get a mentor, somebody from the street art industry who can come and work with young people to provide them industry, training, and employment opportunities. We have recently undergone a survey of all of the murals around Porirua, and we do have a lot of murals around the city, and some of them are really great. Some of them are not so great. And as part of that initiative, our recommendation is that we develop a program where young people can work with established street artists as a program that we run, and we help them to gain industry skills to do street art and to not create a graffiti wall as was originally proposed.
Thank you, Ruben. Mayor Baker, I see you have a question.
It wasn't really a question. It was really to say thank you for this, because my 2 student Alex originally did this. And as much as I supported the graffiti wall, I actually think this is a better way to go about it. So I'm really impressed, and I look forward to it starting. Thanks, Ruben.
Thank you, Mayor Baker. Councillor Duncan, you were next, and then Councillor Trelawney.
Yeah, look, I agree with the Mayor on this, and the comment that resonated most for me in this was the one from WAG. What a great team they are, and what a great job they do. We had graffiti on the Titahi Bay, welcome to Titahi Bay sign on the weekend. I put it on Anteno. First thing Monday morning, it was gone. It's superb. And their comment that we would be sending the wrong message with this graffiti wall resonated well with me. And I think what we've come up with is a great idea.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Councillor Trelawney.
Yeah, very similar from me. I just wanted to thank officers for finding this alternative solution. I was stuck in a really difficult place the first time round, and that I felt that the presentation submission we got on the LTP process around the graffiti wall, I found to be a very convincing one. And then reconciling that with the official advice we then got made it quite difficult for us to now have this alternative option. Instead of just saying no, of saying, okay, well, we're taking the substance of the issue and we're proposing this instead with, similar to Mayor Baker, I think it is an improvement. I just think this is an excellent result, and I applaud that, and I'll definitely be supporting. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Trelawney. Councillor Sayuli.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Hey, I've just got a few questions. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade here or kind of be a downer. But I've just got some questions. I just need clarification, just for my own peace of mind. If that's all right. The money that's going towards WAG, how many years has this been paid for?
Good question.
Through the chair, Councillor Sioli. Sorry, I don't have that information on me for how long WAG has been going, but I do know that for the proposal going forward, we currently have around $10,000 per year to put murals up, and we have more budget that we could potentially add to that, depending on how this program.
I was actually thinking about the $260,000 per annum that it was on the report. Did I read that incorrectly? That was my question, because they talked about contracts and also staffing. I just want to know how long.
That's right, Councillor Sioli. I also don't know how long it is, but it is very long standing. It's started during Mayor Brash's term, I do believe. So it would be 15, 20 years. So it's a very long standing contract. And we do have internal resources as well. So that's a combination of those two things.
Just a follow-up question from that is that with that money that's been paid for the past several years, then is there less graffiti? Has there been less graffiti over the years? That's one of my questions. And if it has, then should that money come down? And if it hasn't, then is there an education program in the city to try to minimize that, so we're not, so that amount of money is not going out every single year? I mean, if it's going out every single year, then there's a problem. And if it's a long-standing problem, then we have an issue.
It is a long-standing problem, and I would point out that we would be amongst one of the cleanest cities in the region in terms of graffiti. I don't know the incidence rate. I suspect it's probably increased, not decreased. The problem is we keep on getting new young people, and it's apparently a thrill for each new generation. So I'm all for education, and I understand WAG does have some element of that within their program, but I would like to think that education would fix it, Councillor, but I am dubious about whether that would be the case.
Does that answer your questions, Councillor Sayuli? It may well be at some stage that we get that WAG come and chat to us about what they actually are doing and how they see things. I think that might help us as councillors, because this is a long, this problem will never end.
Yeah,
And
I mean,
I don't think.
yeah, I mean, my thing actually wasn't against WAG. WAG are doing an excellent job, but my thoughts are just regarding. I mean, if we're spending that amount of money, and if it is an ongoing issue, you know, by society's rate, you know, I mean, I'm just thinking, can we improve it in any way, and so we're minimizing the cost of the ratepayers? That's what my, yeah. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Searle. Councillor Wehapi.
Thank you. Hey, I think this is a really brilliant thing to do. I was one of those people that were in favour of a graffiti wall, although street art is really a flash word for graffiti, but still, this is great. I do want to go back to WAG though. We used to get a yearly report come to council from the graffiti art team. Is that still happening or not?
Well, if it's not, we should make it happen. So, I mean, you've noted that, Reuben?
Yes.
Thank you. Cool.
Anything else, Councillor Wehapi? No. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Matu Upoko. Yeah, I'm still on the fence about this one. I don't know how I'm going to vote. I'll probably vote yes. I'm not entirely comfortable about that. I keep going back to the paragraph of the submission that was put in right at the start. I'm going to quote that because I want this on record. As a 20-year-old woman in today's society, I take photos of graffiti wherever I can because it's meant to be seen, not covered. This sort of talent is underappreciated because of the stigma society has attached with it. And I believe when you give people a chance to shine, they will nourish the plants, not blind your eyes. I think Councillor Wehapi has kind of cottoned on to what where I'm at, which is street art and graffiti are two separate things. And it's about the role as a council as to how we legitimize one type and not the other. We will never be able to legitimize graffiti. That's just, you know, as the chair has said, it's going to happen whether we encourage or educate or try and change behavior or not. Street art comes from individuals who probably started as people who did graffiti to begin with. In terms of providing street art spaces, it's probably, you know, entirely consistent with what's been suggested in Wellington or has been used in Wellington. But at the same time, I think that the solution, while provides a space for creative artists from our community, it doesn't entirely meet with what I think the submitter wanted from us to look at. And at the same time, I don't know if this council could ever have achieved it. That said, I also appreciate the work of WAG in terms of the graffiti removal. Councillor Duncan has mentioned that before. There was, you know, there's been incidents probably about 3 times on the Titahi Bay welcome sign. And each of those times, I think it's probably fair to say that they've been different individuals each time, by my reckoning. And yet, at the same time, I'm also not saying that the work of people like Alex Johnson to get this report to the table is any less diminished because of how we vote on the issue. A lot of work has gone into it, and I appreciate that. So I just need that you put that out there, because I think that there's a sophistication for me that is absent from the Kōrero so far about the differences between graffiti and street art. Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of points there. The 260,000 per annum that Councillor Searle was talking about doesn't go to WAG. Only about half of that goes to WAG. The rest of it goes to Downer and Co for taking the graffiti out. The other thing is that WAG actually operate or work with a website that covers graffiti across the country, and you'd be astounded having a look at that, at the amount of graffiti that they actually get rid of. They do an amazing job.
Thank you for that clarification, Councillor Duncan. Does anyone else wish to comment? Andrew, you have your We can't hear you. Oh, no. So you'll forever hold your peace? Try and get it back. All right. So I think we've had a fair discussion around this. I fully support these recommendations as well. I thought it was an excellent report. I'm now going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, yep. All right. Those against? Carried. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for that report. This now moves us to item 6.3, which is proposed temporary road closure. And this is for Anzac Services, as I understand it. We know that we're doing this, going for temporary road closures for events, regardless of whether they go ahead or not, just to cover ourselves. I'll put the motion, or do I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Ford. Are there any questions from councillors with regard to this? It's a pretty simple thing that we've approved on numerous occasions in terms of road closures. In that case, you're lucky, Kaylee. No questions. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour, up your hands. Those against, carried. Thank you. Now to item 6.4, which is public consultation regarding speed limit changes on Raiha Street. I'll put the motion. Do I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Weehapi. Thank you very much. Get it on the table. This is reasonably clear cut, but does Andrew, if you're there, or anyone else want to just give us a very brief rundown?
Can you hear me now, Chair?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, just reconnected. I apologise. Perhaps at the end of the meeting I can just go back to the WAG item and just brief you on what I know about that in terms of costs. On this one, Chair, so you have a proposal, or 70k down to 50k, public consultation, ads going in the paper. You can see the attached report that we've got from WSP. So that's your transport officers getting some work in by contractors who have recommended 3 areas. We're not consulting on all 3 because we're informed that that would confuse the public. And this is the most important one with Transmission Gully opening. So that's the gist of it. And you'll be responsible for the hearings if submissions come in. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillors, do you have any questions about this? I see Councillor Duncan has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Look, I know we're focusing on Raiha Street, but in the attached document, it foreshadows speed restrictions in Papakowhai Road and Titahi Bay Road as well. Now, I was interested to read on page 49 that there's no evidence of council ever receiving approval for the zebra crossing south of Porirua Street. I was astounded at that. I wondered how that sort of work could go through without approval. And what does that do for anybody who's received infringement notices after sort of, doing anything bad at the crossing, perhaps?
Sorry, Councillor Duncan. So this is with regard to Titahi Bay Road.
Yeah, I know it's not the same thing, but it's in the report there. I wonder if that could be clarified.
Can I just ask? This is not the subject of what we're recommending today, and so it will come up again when we get to Titahi Bay Road. But Andrew, if you could just take this under advisement that this question is going to arise. Yes. I think for the sake of time, because we have a couple of briefings to get through, unless it's a really quick answer.
No, I'll have Daryl Strathen look into it and we'll get back to you in due course. Thank you.
Thank you. So do you have any other questions, Councillor Duncan, with regard to Raiha?
No, that's fine.
Does anyone else have any questions? I mean, I think this is a logical next step in that area, which is only going to get busier. So it makes sense to make that area 50k instead of going in and out of 70 and 50. So without further ado, I will put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. So that gets us to item 6.5, which is drinking water regulation update. You'll see the paper and you will have seen the update itself. Do you want to, who's going to introduce this? And I assume we've got Charles somewhere, or is he not here?
So through the chair, if I just introduce Charles Barker's the regulatory director at Wellington Water. Charles is doing a bit of a roadshow around councils to tell them about what is coming in the regulatory space with the changes that the government has. So Charles had prepared it as a presentation, but I wanted it in the public domain. So that's why you've got it in the format that you have. So I think it's appropriate that if, Charles, you might want to speak briefly to the report for the committee, and then if there are any questions, you could take them. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll take questions at the end from people. If you could be relatively brief in your summary, Charles, that would be great. Are you there?
Councillor Leggett, Charles is not on the call.
Okay. So does anyone else, in terms of, let's see if people have got any questions first. Are there any questions? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, look, I'm on page 71. We're informed that there's data that Wellington Water doesn't generate, and it seems to be outside the expected remit of Taumata Arawai. What are we doing about that? Is Wellington Water going to start generating that information, or have Taumata Arawai overstepped their remit?
Look, this was discussed the other day at Wellington Water, and it's a very good question. And I think Taumata Arawai are asking for some information just in case the economic regulator is not up and running in time. And so that is why they're asking for that. But if you'll note in there, Councillor Duncan, that Wellington Water will be pushing back on those questions in terms of expecting data, which, as you quite rightly say, is not, it doesn't seem to be within their remit. So it's a fair question, and be assured that Wellington Water will be pushing back. Right. Wendy, do you have any comments to make on that? Any additional comments?
I would just say, looking at those measures that they're using as an example, the affordability measures will fall within the remit of the economic regulator, not of Taumata Arawai. And the capital renewal one is something that actually is probably something that should be generated by a water entity. I would have thought. So I think there's a bit of variety in here about these KPIs and how they should be handled in future, but certainly those affordability measures won't be within the ambit of Taumata Arawai. And they do kind of assume a water charge that is not the way we charge currently. So I think it's looking to the future somewhat, some of these KPIs.
Yes, exactly, Wendy. So are there any other questions from people? I think the general point that we should take out of this is that Wellington Water seem to have this pretty firmly under control in terms of what will be expected by Taumata Arawai. And, I think Wellington Water will be more on top of this than many other places in New Zealand. So we'll be pretty well served there. If there are no questions, I'll move the motion, and all those in favour?
Councillor Leggett, we need a seconder, please.
Oh, sorry, I thought we'd had a second. Do we have a seconder? Mayor Baker seconds. And now I'll put the motion, sorry. All those in favour? Right, those against? Carried. Thank you. That now moves us to item 6.6, which is knowing your pipes. So this is a project update, which I know we'll all be interested in, and so will many others. I'll move the motion to get it on the table, move the recommendations, seconded by Councillor Waddle. Thank you very much. David, do you want to, is it you that you're going to just give us a brief introduction? And I'm not sure who's here from Wellington Water, if there's anyone.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Good morning, all. Yeah, I'll just quickly, the report that we've presented in response to a request for an update on the Knowing Your Pipes project. We've got an actual presentation which, as per the regulation update, has been attached to the report. We've got Alistair Allen in the room from Wellington Water, and hoping to be joined very shortly by Abby Jensen, who's been running this project for Wellington Water from the beginning. And Abby was prepared to come in. I don't know whether she's actually joined in yet or not, but she's calling from Queensland. So Alistair, if I can, Mr. Chair, I might just pass over to Alistair.
Yeah.
And get him to just cover off a few words on the actual presentation that was prepared.
Thank you. Thank you, Alistair.
Kia ora tīma. I'm Alistair Allen. I'm interim manager for the Environmental Water Quality Program at Wellington Water. Abby Jensen, as David said, have been managing this project since its inception about a year to 18 months ago, and has been leading the development of the human health mitigation plans and Knowing Your Pipes and the sanitary survey projects across a number of areas within the Wellington region. So just in terms of the presentation, you've got that in front of you in PDF. Okay, give me a second, I'll just pull it up. Thank you. So the Knowing Your Pipes project links quite closely with the human health mitigation program and the sanitary survey program of works in there, and it's targeting improvements in water quality within catchments around the Wellington region. The first area that it started in Porirua was for the South Beach Culverts and Tatahi Bay, and if you can just flick on to a couple of slides, which you can see at the top of the map there. And then we've got two other projects live at the moment in Semple Street and then Bottomley Park, and Bottomley Park's the most recently one to start. The project itself works through responding to recorded elevated levels of E. coli and enterococci within water, measured at different sample points, and then tries to chase those up the catchment to try and find out where the sources of that contamination is coming from. It does that through a whole range of different types of testing. So there's the sampling at various manholes. There's when we start honing in on locations, smoke testing, the dye testing, and then there's follow-up in those locations with private property owners or as part of a public works package to repair fixes. The one that's been running the longest is the South Beach Culvert in Tatahi Bay. Could I just get to flick on another slide, please? So in there, we're in the fault repair phase, as it says. We have honed in on and inspected 57 properties. So there's been a much broader inspection going on than that, but we've identified 57 properties which had a higher risk of having faults. And then of those 57, we found 15 private faults of varying degrees. We have 8 of them repaired, 2 of them are in progress. And then we're carrying out some CCTV work as well to look at what the state of the connection is. The repairs there range from everything from gully traps being wrong sized or too low to the picture on the right there, which was actually just wastewater discharging into the ground and then making its way into stormwater. So some quite significant faults exist within the catchment that we have picked up. And we're hoping as we work through the rest of them, we're going to see an improvement in the results, which will take some time, because when you've had a long time of discharge into groundwater, it's going to take a while for that to flush through the system and then see the water quality improvement at the other end. Can I skip on to the next slide, please? So these graphs here are representative of two of the human health mitigation plans. The one on the right is the Ōwhera stream in Wellington, and this is the one that's been running the longest. And what we expected to see from carrying out repairs, the catchment itself is smaller, less complex than the South Beach Culvert one. But we found a handful for cross connections of wastewater to stormwater in that catchment, got those fixed, and then you can see a sudden drop in terms of the readings in there. The South Beach Culvert story, not quite as compelling yet. You can see in the graph there, the elevated levels, they're much higher to start with than it was in the Ōwhera Bay one, and we're still looking for a downturn in the trend, but we believe there's also more faults we've still yet to find in the catchment, so we're expanding the investigations in that area. Next slide, please. So Semple Street, in the investigation phase on that, we've inspected 60 properties there and working through the CCTV footage to then identify the faults. And just based on past experience, we think that'll be around that 20 property number. We haven't pushed through to get the repairs done as yet. But we have started some of the CCTV work, and our roving crews have done the full and partial blockage repairs. And again, very early in the piece for this one, so no record of improvement yet in the receiving waters. Then on to Bottomley Park, please. So just started in here, and this is at the water sampling stage. So this is where we go through and do grab samples to try and hone in on the hotspots. The red circle roughly indicates where we started doing these inspections based on the results that we have. Next slide, please. We are also considering where to go next. And these are the three catchments that we're looking at next. So the Titahi Bay phase 2 and 3, and then the Browns Bay catchment in there. And these are part of a prioritisation process, looking at where the greatest risk is and where the next human health mitigation plan may need to be set up. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Yes, councillors. Do we have questions from councillors? Yes, Councillor Hayward.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to go to, I think it was that graph regarding the comparison between South Beach Access Culvert and Wellington Bay, and that was on, if I recall correctly, page 83 of our documents. I accept that the conclusion of that data is that it is still too early to say as to the effectiveness of the work in phase 1 around that culvert, but it may help me to understand what is going on in this graph, because one, it's only the rolling 12-month period. Is there some sort of seasonal impact that I'm not seeing because we only have the last 12 months? So if I can confirm that that's not a seasonal dip that happens earlier on in the E. coli count. Secondly, you made mention of the impact of E. coli getting through groundwater flow. Do you have an estimate of how long that impact exists? My understanding is that E. coli itself can only exist for 4 to 6 weeks on its own generally. But would like to get some sense of how that's going to result in the data being improved. And also, can I get some idea of what are the triggers in terms of the lowest level of contamination for E. coli from the regulatory sense, and how far above these lines represent, and what those triggers and what those where that sits in the grander scheme of things, if that makes sense.
Kia ora, councillors. Apologies for my late entry today. So I'm Abby Jensen. So thank you for Alistair for stepping in for me to do the presentation to you. To answer your first question, Councillor Hayward, the water quality sampling that's been done at South Beach Culvert actually started with the global stormwater consent in 2019. So to get 12 months of data, we don't take the results that you're seeing don't actually start till the beginning of 2020, or it might be that I'm sorry, the sampling there's only been like 2 years of data, so we need to show. I've only shown you the last 12 months of data because we need 12 months to show the first sample result. So you're right, there is likely to be a seasonal trend that'll dip in the winter time. Those samples are taken once per month, so it is really a point in time that that monthly sample is taken. Since I think it was November last year, at the request of the community, we have increased our sampling at that point, and we've been doing weekly samples to try and get more information. So we're hoping that with the increased information, we might see more of a trend earlier. I can't quite recall your second question at this point in time. The length of how long we believe the E. coli to persist in groundwater. I did consult with an environmental scientist, and that we would need to undertake a study to determine that, and we'd have to get a groundwater specialist in. That's why we also supported the community's request. They requested fortnightly sampling. We decided, no, we will increase it to weekly to try and see if we can see that trend of improvement, but yet we haven't seen that. And can you refresh me on your third question, please?
Yeah, it's more about where, when we classify in terms of the level of E. coli in freshwater and coastal waterways, what is the lowest, the level at which the lowest level goes into the next level up? So because I'm trying to get a sense of that. Obviously, these numbers on the side here are counts, but what is that in terms of the overall E. coli, particularly E. coli count in the waterway currently?
Yeah. So this particular site under the global stormwater consent is a culvert. So they have the trigger level is a lot higher than a recreational site. So this particular one, to meet the requirements of the global stormwater consent, we need to get it below 10,000. And that's for the Tatahi Bay. But we would like to get it lower than that, and we will continue to work on it. To bring up the example, the Kōrero Bay, that particular site has a different classification under our global stormwater consent, and its trigger level is 1,000. And that is separate again from when you compare Lawa for safe to swim, the levels are much lower again, and they look at enterococci, but it's still bacteria that can harm humans, health in the water, and the safe level is around, don't quote me, but it's around 200 to 250. It's in that range, so it is quite a lot lower.
Okay, those answer my questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hayward. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, I just want to clarify something. I'm looking at phase 2 for Titahi Bay. When I get in meetings with Your Bay, Your Say group, one of the questions they pose is, what of the sewer line that supposedly runs right across the beach and directly to the treatment plant? Is there such a sewer line? And their question is, does that affect the plant's planned capacity, 1,500 litres a second or whatever?
So I do believe there is a sewer that runs along the length of the beach, that it comes down over the hill from like the Tungari Drive side. For it impacting the wastewater treatment plant's 1,500 capacity, no, because the pump station that gravity sewer flows through to at the end of the south end of Tatahi Bay, that is limited by the amount of flow that it can push through to the treatment plant. So that's the interesting thing about the Porirua wastewater treatment plant. it receives its wastewater via pump stations, so it is limited in the capacity of the flow that it can receive.
Great, thanks.
Are there any other questions from councillors? Abby, can I just ask, given talking about South Beach, we've inspected 57, found 15 private faults, 8 repaired, 2 in progress, and we haven't seen any impact yet. Does this worry you at all?
So there's always 2 parts to this. There is the wastewater network that sits on private property, and there's the wastewater network that sits on public property. This particular knowing your pipes is focused on the private property. We also, and I'm hoping that Alistair did reflect on this with the Human Health Mitigation Plan, we dedicated some funding from a different funding source to inspect the public network in South Beach, and we did find faults in the public network in South Beach. So we're actually approaching these in 2 separate activities. So at this point in time, to answer your question, no, not yet concerned. It's good to understand how much impact we can have improving the network on private property, but we know, based on the work that we've already looked at in the public side, there's improvements that need to be made in that network as well.
Can I just ask then, as a follow-up, has that work not started yet? Have there been no repairs made to the public network?
So there has been repairs to significant faults where we found some collapsed sewers or sewers that have significant root intrusion or roots growing into them. So those have been repaired, and those were listed in the presentation, but there is more to be done because there's sewers in poor condition. So Wellington Water has prepared what we call a project brief, which outlines what we believe, or what we for the beginning of the project, what we expect the extent of the work to do and what we anticipate that work will cost. So that is just sitting with Wellington Water now. It's actually probably not even fully signed off, but it's been definitely drafted and shared for comment. So that work does need to happen as well to see that improvement. That's what we anticipate now.
Okay, I guess time will tell then. Councillor Hayward, I'll allow another one. Yep.
Thank you. It's actually a process question. I know that this is the first time that this committee has seen a report in regards to this project itself. May I suggest that we look at having another follow-up session of this in, say, 6 to 9 months' time to kind of get further data about the progress on phase 1 in particular, because obviously that has implications in terms of our awareness as this expands to phases 2 and 3 and elsewhere.
Yeah, noted, Councillor Hayward. I assumed that we would do that, and I see David Down nodding his head. Thank you. Are there any other questions from councillors? If not, I will put the motion. Thank you, Abby, for coming in all the way from Australia. And I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. We look forward to the future reports as well. Okay, so that now brings us to the close of the meeting, but I do note that, Andrew, you did want to maybe just give us an update on the WAG item, given that it was already in the agenda.
Sorry, Ross, point of order quickly.
Go for it.
I've just noticed in the very first paper that the date refers to 1 July 21, which I think is a mistake. I assume that can be fixed by a chair's recommendation at the council level, so I don't think we'd have to do anything else here, but just wanted to flag that.
Can we take advice on that? Thank you very much, Mike. Well done.
Caroline, did you understand that?
Yes, and I will make a note of it in the minutes, and that can be changed at council with the recommendation report.
Very good. Thank you
very much. Through the chair, I just went looking for some information on WAG. Councillor Duncan was correct. It's $130,000. We have contracted them as a group for the last 10 years. They were recontracted in November last year for another 12 months. For the $130,000 we pay, approximately 70,000 of it goes into citywide graffiti removal and reporting, and they aim to clean graffiti within 48 hours of it being reported. There's a litter pickup and maintenance service, which is approximately $10,000, where they clean walkways and concentrate on the Mungavin tunnels, with water blasting done quarterly. There's another 5,000 which goes into intelligence gathering about rough sleeping, graffiti and any safety issues, where they come through to the council city partnerships team. There's $20,000 approximately for support and mentoring of local youth on community service hours through police alternative action programs. Young people in Porirua involved in non-violent offences are supported and mentored by local people, and further work to understand what's involved in graffiti removal. 7,500 is set up for residential cleanup and consultation, working with local residents on graffiti removal. There's 7,500 for business cleanup and consultation, where businesses are engaged and programs arranged. And then there's $10,000 for Ferry Place and Mungavin tunnels to complete and partially fund work there. And the money, some of the money comes from transport, some of the money comes from other sources. So hopefully that sort of assists with the facts, but they do report in, the contract has them reporting into council quarterly on their progress, so that information is in council and we can certainly report it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Well, that gives us some more information. Okay, that now brings us to the completion of business, and I'll declare the meeting closed at 9:32 a.m. We're going to move into public excluded. So can you tell me when live stream has been stopped, please?
Can we get a mover and a seconder to move into public excluded, please?
Oh, okay, before we move into it, I was going to do that later. Right. Do we have I'll move that we move into public excluded. Thank you, Councillor Morell, seconded. All those